The Digital World, August 2016. A seemingly innocuous blog post, etched onto a forgotten corner of the internet, began to blink like a warning light in the dead of night. It was cryptic, taunting, a declaration from a mysterious entity calling themselves the Shadow Brokers. They claimed to possess the crown jewels, the ultimate cyber arsenal of an elite, secretive hacking group, known only in whispers within intelligence circles as Equation Group. Security analysts, accustomed to digital noise, initially dismissed it as a crude joke, another desperate plea for attention in the vast, echoing void of the dark web. But then, the first fragment of proof emerged. A small archive, encrypted, a tantalizing glimpse of something utterly terrifying. It wasn't just code, it was a digital fingerprint, undeniably belonging to the National Security Agency. Panic began to ripple through the upper echelons of cybersecurity. The unthinkable was staring them in the face. Someone had breached the unbreachable. They hadn't just stolen secrets, they had stolen weapons. Sophisticated, highly classified tools designed to penetrate the deepest, most secure networks on Earth. For years, these tools had been the unseen hand shaping geopolitical power, defending national interests, or perhaps, projecting influence in ways the public could only speculate. Now, they were potentially for sale, or worse, about to be unleashed. The implications were catastrophic, a digital Armageddon waiting in the wings. This was not a data breach, it was a fundamental shift in the very fabric of internet security. A line had been crossed, a Pandora's box pried open, and no one knew the full extent of the horror about to spill out. The world was about to change, forever. The Shadow Brokers didn't just announce their existence, they issued an ultimatum. An auction. For the best files, they demanded a staggering sum, 1 million Bitcoin. At the time, an astronomical figure, designed to be almost unpayable, yet hinting at the immense value of what they held. They promised to reveal more, much more, if their demands were met. This wasn't a typical hack and dump operation, it was a brazen, theatrical spectacle designed to maximize leverage and terror. The security community scrambled, not just to verify the claims, but to understand the audacity. Who were these people? Were they a rogue state? A disgruntled insider? A collective of ideologically driven hackers? Each theory brought a fresh wave of chilling possibilities. The initial data dump, the teaser files, contained a number of exploits and implants, clearly sophisticated, clearly government-grade. One particular script, known as blasting, immediately caught the attention of experts. It was a clear indicator of Equation Group's modus operandi, matching previously discovered, highly complex malware. This wasn't some script kiddie's amateur attempt. This was the real deal. The tools were designed for precision, for stealth, for deep penetration into systems thought impervious. They bypassed firewalls, exploited zero-day vulnerabilities, and established persistent footholds. These weren't just spy tools, they were keys to digital kingdoms, capable of unlocking virtually any network. The question now wasn't if the Shadow Brokers had the goods, but what they planned to do with them, and who would pay the ransom for such devastating power. To understand the true weight of the Shadow Brokers' claims, one had to understand the Equation Group. For years, cybersecurity researchers, notably at Kaspersky Lab, had been tracking an incredibly advanced threat actor they dubbed the Equation Group. This was not a typical hacking collective, their operation showed an unparalleled level of sophistication, persistence, and resources, suggestive of a state-sponsored entity operating at the very pinnacle of cyber espionage. Their malware was legendary, self-modifying, capable of rewriting hard drive firmware, hiding in plain sight, surviving system reinstalls. They employed unique encryption techniques, complex command and control infrastructures, and an astonishing array of zero-day exploits, vulnerabilities unknown even to the software manufacturers themselves. The Equation Group was believed to be responsible for some of the most complex cyber attacks ever uncovered, including the infamous Stuxnet worm that targeted Iranian nuclear facilities. When the Shadow Brokers released their first free samples, the cybersecurity world instantly recognized the distinct digital signatures. The encryption keys, the file naming conventions, the specific exploit techniques, they all pointed to Equation Group. It was like finding a secret blueprint for a nuclear submarine, unmistakably from a specific naval power. The reveal sent shockwaves through intelligence agencies globally. If these tools, crafted with unimaginable resources and years of development, were now in the hands of an unknown adversary, the balance of power in the digital world was about to be profoundly disrupted. The Equation Group, once an enigma of unparalleled skill, was now compromised, and their very existence laid bare. Days turned into weeks, and the shadow brokers' grand auction sputtered. The Bitcoin address they provided remained largely empty. No nation-state, no major corporation, no shadowy syndicate dared to meet their exorbitant price. The risk of engaging with such an unpredictable entity, and the sheer audacity of the demand, proved too high. The international community, meanwhile, held its breath. Was this a bluff? Or were they merely waiting for the right buyer? Despite the lack of bids, the threat remained palpable. The shadow brokers continued to post taunting messages, deriding their perceived enemies and hinting at further releases. They seemed to relish the chaos, the global fear they had ignited. Their communications were laced with broken English, often mocking intelligence agencies and their inability to stop them. This quirky, almost cartoonish persona belied the deadly seriousness of their claims. Behind the scenes, intelligence agencies around the world were in a frenzy. Attempts were made to trace the shadow brokers, to identify their origins, to understand their motives. Was this an act of digital terrorism? A state-sponsored information operation? Or a disgruntled insider's revenge? The silence from the NSA was deafening, a tacit acknowledgement of the gravity of the situation. Every option was on the table, every contingency planned. The auction may have failed to find a buyer, but it had successfully demonstrated the profound vulnerability of even the most sophisticated cyber defenses. The shadow brokers were not going away, they were simply biding their time, holding a ticking bomb over the internet.
With the auction failing, the shadow brokers shifted tactics. Instead of a single, massive dump, they began a methodical, chilling drip feed of classified material. First, a password-protected archive. Then, a series of blog posts, each one revealing a fragment, a tantalizing clue, before promising more. This approach kept the cybersecurity world perpetually on edge, forced to react to each new release, unable to fully prepare for what might come next. One of the most significant early releases was a collection of exploits targeting Cisco firewalls and other enterprise hardware. These weren't just theoretical vulnerabilities. These were proven, functional tools designed to penetrate high-value targets. Network administrators across the globe suddenly faced a stark reality. Their meticulously built defenses, once considered impenetrable, were now potentially compromised by tools readily available to anyone with a few clicks. Each release was accompanied by increasingly vitriolic rhetoric from the shadow brokers, lambasting the Equation Group and American foreign policy. This political edge fueled speculation about their origins. Were they Russian? Chinese? A disgruntled former NSA employee? The ambiguity was a weapon in itself, sowing distrust and panic. The drip feed wasn't just about showing off. It was about demonstrating persistent control over a devastating arsenal, applying sustained pressure, and slowly, systematically, dismantling the perceived invulnerability of global digital infrastructure. The internet was bleeding, and the shadow brokers were holding the knife.
Among the torrent of data, a peculiar tool surfaced, Fuzzbunch. It wasn't an exploit itself, but a sophisticated configuration utility. Its purpose was chillingly precise, to customize and deploy other Equation Group implants, enabling operators to tailor their attacks to specific targets. Fuzzbunch acted as a control panel for a whole suite of offensive capabilities, allowing hackers to select payloads, define targets, and manage persistence mechanisms. This wasn't just individual exploits, this was an entire offensive framework. Fuzzbunch revealed the complex kill chain, the step-by-step process used by the NSA to gain access, establish control, and extract data from compromised systems. It included tools for reconnaissance, initial compromise, privilege escalation, lateral movement, and data exfiltration. The revelation was akin to an adversary acquiring not just a single advanced weapon, but the entire blueprint and manufacturing facility for that weapon system. Security vendors and researchers worked around the clock, analyzing the code, reverse engineering the exploits, and trying to develop patches and signatures before the tools could be weaponized by malicious actors. But the sheer volume and sophistication of the leaked arsenal made it an overwhelming task. Every new revelation from the shadow brokers was a race against time, a frantic scramble to plug holes that had been secretly exploited for years by one of the world's most capable intelligence agencies. The internet was now a minefield, with unknown vulnerabilities waiting to detonate. The true catastrophe arrived in April 2017. Frustrated by the lack of payment, or perhaps driven by a deeper agenda, the shadow brokers released their most devastating cache yet. This was the dump of all dumps, containing a treasure trove of exploits targeting Microsoft Windows operating systems. The most infamous among them was EternalBlue. EternalBlue was a remote code execution exploit that targeted a vulnerability in Microsoft's implementation of the server message block protocol. In layman's terms, it allowed an attacker to execute malicious code on a vulnerable Windows machine remotely, without any user interaction. It was a wormable exploit, meaning it could spread rapidly from one computer to another across networks, virtually unimpeded. This wasn't just a powerful tool, it was an internet-breaking weapon. Microsoft, likely having been tipped off by intelligence agencies, had issued a patch for this specific vulnerability a month prior, in March 2017, as part of their regular Patch Tuesday updates. But here lay the critical flaw, as many organizations and individuals, especially those with older operating systems or lax update policies, had not applied the patch. They were sitting ducks. The release of EternalBlue immediately became a 5-alarm fire drill for the entire cybersecurity world, knowing the immense potential for destruction it carried. The fuse had been lit, and the countdown to global chaos had begun. Just 1 month after the shadow brokers unleashed EternalBlue, the digital world shuddered. On May 12, 2017, the WannaCry ransomware worm exploded across the globe. It was an unprecedented, global cyber attack, encrypting files on hundreds of thousands of computers in over 150 countries. WannaCry didn't just target individuals, it brought critical infrastructure to its knees. Hospitals in the UK had their systems locked, forcing ambulances to divert and operations to be cancelled. German railways saw their departure boards blanked out. Factories, universities, government agencies, all fell victim. The attack spread with astonishing speed, precisely because it leveraged EternalBlue. The NSA superweapon, designed for targeted espionage, had been repurposed by criminals into a blunt instrument of chaos and extortion. Victims were presented with a ransom note demanding Bitcoin payment to decrypt their files, threatening to permanently delete them if payment wasn't made within a certain time frame. The irony was stark. The very tools developed to secure one nation's interests were now being used to extort citizens worldwide, shattering trust in digital systems. The WannaCry outbreak served as a horrifying demonstration of what happens when state-sponsored cyber weaponry falls into the wrong hands. It exposed the fragile underbelly of global connectivity and left a trail of immense financial and operational damage. The internet was no longer just a network, it was a battlefield. Before the world could fully recover from WannaCry, another, even more devastating attack struck just a month later, in June 2017. This was NotPetya. Initially disguised as ransomware, demanding payment, NotPetya quickly revealed its true, far more malevolent nature, a wiper. It wasn't designed to encrypt and extort, it was designed to destroy. Leveraging a modified version of EternalBlue, alongside another shadow broker's tool called EternalRomance, NotPetya spread rapidly through corporate networks, encrypting master boot records and rendering computers permanently inoperable. It specifically targeted Ukrainian organizations first, crippling critical infrastructure, banks, government agencies, and even the Chernobyl radiation monitoring system. But like WannaCry, it didn't stay contained. From Ukraine, NotPetya leaped borders, infecting global shipping giant Maersk, pharmaceutical behemoth Merck, and FedEx European subsidiary, TNT Express, among many others. The economic damage was staggering, estimated in the tens of billions of dollars, making it one of the costliest cyber attacks in history. The US and UK governments later formally attributed NotPetya to Russia, specifically its military intelligence unit, the GRU. This wasn't just cybercrime, it was an act of state-sponsored cyber warfare, using tools originally developed by another nation, unleashed with indiscriminate fury. The Shadow Brokers leak had moved beyond mere espionage, it had enabled a new, terrifying form of geopolitical conflict. As the internet burned, the National Security Agency maintained a public silence, a stony refusal to acknowledge the Shadow Brokers leak directly. Internally, however, a maelstrom raged. The compromise of the Equation Group's arsenal was nothing short of a national security catastrophe. These were their crown jewels, their most sophisticated, deeply guarded secrets, now weaponized and turned against the very world they were meant to protect or exploit. The immediate question was agonizing: how? How could such a breach occur within one of the world's most secure and technologically advanced intelligence agencies? An internal investigation, surely among the most intense in the agency's history, began immediately. Was it an insider threat, a rogue employee, perhaps ideologically motivated or financially coerced? Or was it a brilliantly executed external breach by a peer-level nation-state, exploiting a vulnerability even the NSA hadn't foreseen? The shame and anger within the agency were immense. Years, even decades, of painstaking work, research, and development, hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars, had been utterly compromised. Their operational capabilities were severely degraded, their methods exposed. The intelligence community now faced the grim reality that adversaries had not only reverse-engineered their best weapons but were now using them as their own. The leak wasn't just a technical failure, it was a profound blow to the NSA's prestige, its capabilities, and its reputation for absolute digital supremacy.
The hunt for the shadow brokers intensified, converging on two primary theories: the insider and the outsider. The insider theory gained traction due to the sheer depth and breadth of the leaked tools. How could an external actor possibly gain access to such a comprehensive arsenal, including obscure configuration tools and highly specific exploits, without an intimate knowledge of Equation Group's internal workings? Speculation often turned to former NSA contractor Edward Snowden, but he vehemently denied any connection. And experts largely agreed the leak's timeline and nature didn't align with his actions. However, the possibility of a different disgruntled insider, perhaps one who shared Snowden's anti-surveillance sentiments or harbored other grievances, remained a potent threat. The security implications of an internal betrayal were terrifying. Conversely, the outsider theory pointed toward a sophisticated state-sponsored actor, with Russia being the most frequently cited suspect. The timing of the leak, coinciding with escalating geopolitical tensions, and the eventual weaponization of the tools by entities linked to the GRU, lent weight to this hypothesis. A foreign intelligence agency, through a complex, long-term operation, might have infiltrated NSA networks, perhaps even years prior, collecting the arsenal slowly and meticulously. The shadow broker's public persona, with its taunting, broken English, could have been a sophisticated disinformation tactic, designed to obscure their true origins. The digital ghost remained elusive, leaving a trail of destruction but no clear identity.
The Shadow Brokers leak didn't just expose specific tools, it revealed the existence of a clandestine Zero-Day Bazaar. Zero days are vulnerabilities in software or hardware that are unknown to the vendor and thus have no available patch. They are the ultimate cyber advantage, highly prized by intelligence agencies and cybercriminals alike. The NSA, through Equation Group, had amassed an extraordinary collection of these vulnerabilities, essentially holding them secret for their own offensive operations. When these 0 days were dumped by the shadow brokers, they suddenly became N days, known vulnerabilities that could be patched. But the damage was done. By exposing these flaws to the public, the NSA had lost its exclusive access to these powerful exploits. Furthermore, it sparked an intense ethical debate: should intelligence agencies hoard 0-day vulnerabilities for offensive purposes, knowing that if they are ever leaked, they could cause catastrophic harm? Or should they disclose them responsibly to vendors, allowing them to be patched, thus securing the internet for everyone? The leak demonstrated the immense risk of the hoarding strategy. The very tools meant to give one nation an advantage became a global liability, turning critical infrastructure into easy targets for ransomware operators and state-sponsored attackers. The world awoke to the uncomfortable truth that the digital arms race had a hidden cost: the stability and security of the global internet itself. The internet was truly broken, its underlying architecture riddled with unaddressed, secret weaknesses. The shadow brokers effectively vanished as mysteriously as they appeared, leaving behind a digital wasteland. Their last public message was in 2017, a seemingly innocuous post that some interpreted as a farewell. But their impact reverberated far beyond their disappearance. The leak fundamentally reshaped the geopolitical world of cyber warfare. Nations now understood the immense power of leaked offensive tools and the catastrophic consequences of their proliferation. Governments worldwide began to re-evaluate their cyber strategies, increasing investments in defensive capabilities and tightening operational security around their own digital arsenals. The leak served as a harsh lesson: no agency, no matter how sophisticated, was truly unbreachable. It spurred a new urgency in intelligence communities to not only develop advanced offensive capabilities but also to safeguard them with unprecedented vigilance. Beyond the state level, the leak also democratized high-end cyber weaponry. Tools once exclusively within the domain of elite intelligence agencies were now in the hands of various threat actors, from financially motivated criminals to rogue states. This dramatically lowered the barrier to entry for highly destructive cyber attacks, making the internet a more dangerous and unpredictable place for everyone. A new digital Cold War had begun, its rules unwritten, its battlefields unseen, and its weapons more destructive than ever imagined. Years later, the specter of the shadow brokers leak still haunts the internet. The damage inflicted by WannaCry and NotPetya was immense, but the long-term consequences are even more profound. The leak irrevocably broke a sense of fundamental trust and security in the digital world. It demonstrated that even the most powerful nations could not fully control their most potent weapons, and that those weapons, once unleashed, could inflict indiscriminate, global harm. The vulnerabilities revealed continue to be a threat. While many have been patched, the general understanding of how state-level offensive tools operate remains public knowledge, allowing new malicious actors to craft similar attacks. The Internet, once envisioned as a decentralized platform for connection and information, is now largely perceived as a contested battle space, constantly under threat. The shadow brokers leak served as a stark, terrifying wake-up call. It forced a global reckoning with the ethical dilemmas of cyber warfare, the perils of stockpiling zero-day exploits, and the urgent need for collective cyber defense. The incident forever altered our perception of digital security, reminding us of the invisible forces at play, the secret wars being fought in the shadows, and the constant, evolving threat to the fragile digital infrastructure that underpins our modern world. The Internet, as we knew it, was irrevocably changed, forever marked by the ghost of the Equation Group's stolen arsenal.